The giant eel birds of Regulus 5 must return to the caverns where they hatched once every 11 years. Nurse Chapel makes Vulcan plomeek soup, and Spock is as tight-lipped as an Aldebaran shell mouth. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc, Lofton, and Walter Koenig.
Hello.
Hi.
Is that you, Walter? My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek, the original series, finally, Season 2, Episode 1, Amok Time, written by Theodore Sturgeon. More on that in a moment. Directed by Joseph Pevney. This was September 15th, 1967, if you can believe that. How you guys doing today?
Wow.
September 15th was the day after my birthday.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. Also, everybody, we'd like to point out very quickly that this episode is sponsored by our friends at Creation Entertainment and Star Trek San Francisco, STSF. It's a cool convention, lots of Star Trek and sci-fi actors, including Cirroc Lofton. I'll be there as well. Melissa Longo, tons of cool people. Don Lewis, Connor Trenier, Brent Spiner, Gates McFadden, just to name a few. You need to go there. It's March 8th through 10th, just south of San Francisco in Burlingame, right next to the San Francisco airport. Go to creationentertainment.com. That's creationent.com to get yourself some tickets and a cool room to stay in. All right, let's get into this. Walter.
Yes. What? Who? What?
Oh, you got a different voice than the beginning.
Yeah. Yes.
So, first things first.
What did you think? It's always about what you think, Walter, because you were there, you were in the mix during this time. So, really, the first question I always have in the back of my head when I'm watching it is, what is Walter thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very interesting because I didn't recall it in that much. I didn't recall it that specifically, and was delighted to watch it again and realize how well done it was. I was extremely pleased to see Theodore Sturgeon had written it. It was a very good episode. It really was structured in a way that made it riveting, very compelling story to watch. And he did some interesting things with conflict, writing about conflict. The fact that Spock was reluctant to discuss why he had to go back to Vulcan. There's conflict there. The audience is watching the thing. What's this all about? What's happening? We did not understand, and it was a very sustaining moment as we riveted our attention on what was going on with Mr. Spock. Now, I had just seen The Cage, and I saw the enormous difference in terms of the profundity of his character. On The Cage, he was the guy with the funny eyebrows. By the time we got to Amok Time, he was a deeply distressed person with a great deal of conflict and played it very, very well. It was very internalized. We wanted desperately to know what was going on, why he had to go there. It was the character had evolved in the year between the Cage and the second season of Star Trek. So I was very impressed with Leonard. My sense was when I watched him, when I saw him walking in through the halls and on the set, that this was an actor who was totally, deeply immersed in this character, and I was very, very impressed with his work.
Yeah, he definitely carried this episode along with William Shatner. I thought that was One of the things that jumped out to me, Walter, was the pace. And I feel like this pace is what I feel is the essence of Star Trek when I think of Star Trek. I think of this eeriness, this drama, this heightened sense of um, you know, tension that you can kind of cut in the air. But also the pace, because there's so much in today's Star Trek is, I think, faster paced and more action based, as opposed to, you know, storyline and really slow delivering performances. I felt like these performances were more drawn out and they took their time to um, work their way through these scenes. Did you get a sense of that as well?
Absolutely. And I was also, I was conscious of the close-ups. Joe Pevney included a lot of close-ups, and that just gave you intensified the focus on what was happening and the stuff that Mr. Spock was going through. And Bill as well. Bill had some really delightful moments. So yeah, I was totally absorbed in the story, and I thought that this might be Leonard's best opportunity to play Spock, because there was so much internalized, so much going on, and from his difficulty in expressing why he needed to go back to Vulcan, to his anger. I mean, it was like Trump's mugshot. His head was down and his eyes were looking forward, and very threatening and very convincing. So I was applauding both guys. I thought they did a very good job, and I loved the moment that Theodore Sturgeon had. Totally surprised moment when T'Pring, Arlene Martel, nay Arlene Sachs. See how much I know?
Good knowledge.
Yeah.
Good knowledge.
Yeah.
And I got a story about her. So anyway, when she steps forward and says him, and she's talking about Kirk, that was a big surprise. And for sure, we thought it was the other guy, the other Vulcan.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how are they going to justify this? How are they going to explain this? And the explanation was very reasonable. She got the hots for the other guy. So
who doesn't?
Yes. Oh God! How did you know?
Well, there are a couple things I wanted to jump on. First, Cirroc, when you were talking about adding the tension, building that up, I got that same sense. The three of us are really kind of watching this with brand new or fresh eyes. Walter, you haven't seen these in many, many decades. Cirroc and I haven't seen these. I've seen a few episodes. I feel like this is one of the ones I had seen, actually, of the 4 or 5 that I've seen. Cirroc has only seen a handful as well.
Yeah.
But what I noticed immediately, within the first 10 or 15 minutes, was what Cirroc was describing about the pacing, but not so much just the pacing, but like also the depth, the tension. And I was calling it mysticism and awe. And this is something that clearly, watching one episode, the original series had, that none of the other series did have. This slow building mysticism and awe, and the music was unbelievable. And you're just, and it works. You when you go to Vulcan, you do have this feeling of awe, of like, wow, we're arriving at this crazy place. And when, anyway, there's a lot to it. And I'm looking forward to a lot more of that. If that's what this is going to be like, boy, oh boy, are we in for a treat. Walter, can you talk a bit more about Leonard's performance? You touched on it a bit, because I noticed the same thing. We're watching him. He's got his back turned to Kirk, and we're watching the inner struggle on his face. And it's fairly subtle, but the camera, of course, picks it up, and and he nailed it. And we're watching this man, have this inner battle with himself and trying to keep his composure and try not to give too much information. It's really beautiful to see.
It is. It's a great example of really good acting. You really feel that you're climbing into his soul and discovering what's transpiring. He was very, very believable, and I think the way Bill played off him was delightful. There were a couple of moments where the reaction from Captain Kirk was very spontaneous. And it was like, whoa, he's really surprised to see this. And the fight between Kirk and Spock is classic. I mean, where would you ever see that again? And I don't think there ever was another fight like that. A lot of drop kicking and rolling and tumbling and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
but I thought Leonard's body language during the fight scene really conveyed that he was not in the right state of mind. There was a slumping of the shoulders. There was a way that his posture was changed, and it felt like he was really conveying that he was, going through this emotional battle, and that he wasn't himself able to make kind of rational, logical decisions. I felt like it was expressed in his being more, just all throughout this episode. He conveyed the emotions right on cue for me. I was along for the ride.
Yeah. Well, I think, absolutely, I agree with you. And I give a round of applause to Ted Sturgeon, because I think it was a very well designed story that keep you captivated by what was happening, that you didn't know what was going to happen next. I think the moment when Arlene points to Kirk and says him, or whatever it is that she says, was a big surprise. I'd forgotten that. So that was a big surprise. And so I thought he executed this story very well, keeping in mind the attention that he demanded from the audience, and the audience was there with him the whole time. So incredible fight between Kirk and Spock. Spock's enigmatic behavior. What's going on? Why is he feeling this way? Never felt it was laughable or humorous that he's got the hots, he's in heat, and I thought it was executed extremely well, and that I believed it. I believe that this is another society and a different culture, and they function differently from the way we do. So it was a great journey. I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of it.
A couple things to add to that is the fight scene you mentioned. I was watching. I did not see a stunt double, Leonard. Leonard is jumping backwards and landing on his back next to some rocky steps, and I played it a few times. I'm like, that is not a stunt double. That is Leonard. And if you play it slowly, you can see he also does a backflip. He sips some lemonade. He's very talented, very skillful. But anyway, kudos to him for achieving that.
Yeah.
But also,
I did see a long shot of Kirk and Spock fighting. It was a long shot, and it wasn't Bill. I could tell by the physical action that it wasn't Bill.
Come on, Bill. But also, like you mentioned, I hadn't even considered that about it. It's a fine line to execute this script without making it comedic, because you could definitely see it as, oh, yeah, it's kind of personal. Cue the laugh track. You mean you're in heat, Spock? But the fact that he played it with such intensity and shame, and we understand this, it's not funny, it's not exciting, it's not necessarily enjoyable, it's something that's difficult, that they are embarrassed about because they want to be, and he even made a line about, like, you know, they try to stay civilized, or they, you know, they lose their civilization about it. But that's a really good point about that.
Yeah, I also thought that the director did a great job, Joseph Pevney. There were some shots that I really enjoyed. One of them was the shot of Kirk and Spock when Spock's holding that knife behind his hand, and they show you the reverse angle, so you can see like he's so, you know, out of character. He's ready to stab this guy or something. It looked like he was ready to do something, and Kirk comes forward to make a call on the intercom or what it was. And as he comes forward, he kind of leans, he looks over, and he can see that his hands are clenched behind his back, that he's holding some kind of, I don't know what that thing was. It looked like a you know, letter opener or something.
We both said letter opener.
That's what I was like. That's what I thought. It looked like a letter opener, but it still looked like, you know, he was holding back a rage or a violence, like he was willing to attack him, and that gave me, you know, added to the tension, added to the feeling of what is going to happen.
And did you notice, Cirroc, that I don't know if it was an actor's choice on Bill's part or if it was a directorial direction, but I was happy that Kirk did not overplay that when he noticed it. Because some people might think, oh, you see this, oh dear, I have to show it on my face, I'm so concerned. But he didn't. It was just a very subtle noticing, like, okay, you know, I'm aware of this, but I'm not too concerned. I'm just going to be aware of it. So I thought that was really good. Maybe a director's, you know, direction to tell him, you're just noticing it. Trust the audience here.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought it was well played throughout the episode, but those subtle beats there, I think an actor's instinct is to naturally overplay seeing the weapon or whatnot, you know, so you would exaggerate the threat. I thought he was cool and calm about it. I wanted to ask you, Walter, Dr. McCoy and his performance. I wanted you to kind of give me some thoughts about that before I weigh in on what I felt.
I mean, I don't exactly know. I don't know how to respond to that. I thought DeForest was fine. I thought it was always good. He was, you know, the middleman, the guy in between, and I thought he discharged his responsibility with a great deal of truthfulness and believability. I did want to mention that Joe Pevney, who was the director, directed me in an Alfred Hitchcock Hour Presents.
Really?
Oh yeah. I played opposite James Caan. He was the good guy. I was the bad guy, and we went to school together. Jimmy and I. And I had a scene where I was supposed to strike him across the face with the back of my hand, and I was wearing this ring. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
And I swung at him and I hit him.
Oh.
And he started to bleed. His lips started to bleed. And I looked down in horror. My God, what have I done? And he was taking his, don't stop. You know, he loved it. He loved the blood coming down his face. But anyway, Joe Pevney was a great guy. Now, I got to tell you.
Well, that was before this? The Alfred Hitchcock?
Yes. And Joe was in the room when I auditioned for Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah, and he was kept, you know, when we were doing the Hitchcock, he kept saying, "You're going to be a star. You're going to be a star," which I thought was really nice, but I didn't have any great belief in that.
Yeah, how did he know you were going to be on the seventh rule later?
That's right. That's the whole thing. What happens?
So he was there during the audition when you were auditioning for Chekov. That's
everybody that was in the room, with the exception of Gene Kuhn, was there. Everybody I'd worked for, Gene Roddenberry, I'd worked for on The Lieutenant, Joe Pevney. There was somebody else involved. It was pretty much a done deal as long as I didn't screw it up.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was about directing for television is the directors who come in to direct an episode, they know that it isn't really cool to direct the running cast. They've been doing these roles. They are familiar with what they want. So the directors generally don't comment to the regulars. If they comment at all, Jesus, I got such a humming in my ear. If they comment at all, it's to the guest actors, and they'll say something to them. So whatever you saw that you thought was commendable, and that from the regular actors, from Bill and Leonard and so on, they invented. I can tell you without qualification that they invented that. Yeah. And the directors just respected what they brought to it. And so, a round of applause for Bill and Leonard for having this instinctive feelings about what their characters would be doing.
That's great to know. So when we see a great actor's choice like that, we know that unless we hear otherwise, we'll presume that it was the actor's choice more so than a direction. Absolutely. Great.
Yeah. There were moments there because, we were talking about DeForest Kelley, about his performance. I thought that he showed some really good transitional, subtle moments to me that I felt were resonated. One of them in particular was when Spock walks into the medical room, and he says, "I'm here to report for the medical, and now that I've reported, I'm going to leave." And you see how angry he gets. He's like, "Well, I have a job too. I've got to answer to the same person you got to answer to." And then he changes. I thought McCoy did a nice little change where he's like, "Hey, man, you okay?" Like, there was, you know what I mean? There was that change where he's like, hey, whoa, you're not playing this game with me. And then he realizes this guy's going through something. Let me take off my Starfleet hat and put on my friend guy hat and switch the tone. And I thought that tone was switched very well on his part during that exchange. Another person that did that was Shatner. The same kind of tone switch when he's like, "Hey, I'm coming to you as a friend, like as a friend. You okay? Like, what's going on, buddy?" And I thought he did the same switch. And I just those kinds of moments for me show, a level of compassion. It shows the actor is making those transitions in his performance. Taking off the Starfleet hat, putting on the just "I'm your buddy" hat. And I like those moments, those well written and also well performed.
It's you're absolutely right. It's a great point to make, because what happens when you go from the anger and you contrast it to a transitional behavior, and you see the difference between the angry guy, and that at the same time there's this other layer and this other dimension to his character. It sticks with you. It's stamped on the series. So although Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock are always bickering, you had to almost laugh because you knew deep down that they really liked each other. And you got that from moments like you're describing, and it stayed with you. So you could do all this friction and still believe that they were very good friends and very loyal to each other.
Right. And then when Spock says, you bring our closest friends or something like that to the planet, and he says, "I would like you to come, Kirk," but then he also said Bones. And if you'll notice, Bones didn't go like, "What? Me, you green-blooded hobgoblin? We're not friends." He just, it's almost like they have that understanding. He knows that they're secretly friends, and that's why there wasn't an exclamation of, "Why me? You said friends."
No, you're absolutely right. It's a very good point. It's a very good point, because it's an enduring experience. We see it week to week, and you just have to make the impression once, and the audience embraces it and knows that there is a relationship here that goes beyond, yeah, you too, yeah, me too. That they really care for each other, and it's charming. It's just charming.
Well, let's jump to our break very quickly here. Cirroc, were you going to say something? Sorry.
No, but on the other side, I'm going to go a little bit more into that. Theodore Sturgeon, just really has a good feel for this episode, because I can say, having not seen it, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Same. That's sometimes you watch an episode, you're like, all right, this is gonna, I know what's going to happen. And I'm watching this. I'm like, well, what's going to happen? Even when Kirk gets killed at the end, I'm like, did they really like, what's going on here? Like, who kills the star of the show, in the first episode of the second season? So I was thinking, this is really good stuff, because you don't see this kind of stuff. They broke a few rules in storytelling where, killing the lead of the show, the love interest doesn't end up with Spock. Instead, they go the opposite ways. I mean, there's so many things that I thought were going to happen that did not happen. And I thought credit to Theodore Sturgeon, Mr. Sturgeon, for writing a script that was unpredictable. It was like,
right.
I knew what was going to happen, and then I was wrong. But I was like, I even put in my notes, I was like, I bet I know what's going to happen, and I was wrong. So kudos all around. We're also going to get a story from Walter about Arlene Martell. He promised us a story about her. I've got something to add about Sturgeon. So much more to discuss, everybody. We'll be right back on the other side on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc, Lofton, and the legendary Walter Koenig. Here are the trivioids of the week, everybody. They go a little something like this. Spock has been acting nervously. Nurse Chapel makes Vulcan Plomeek soup. Deep Space Nine fans will recognize Plomeek soup. Dr. Julian Bashir, that Walter was actually talking to us about before we hit record, about Alexander Siddig, but he loves Plomeek soup. Also, even Vulcans aren't indestructible. Spock hides a knife behind his back. Spock is as tight-lipped as an Aldebaran shellmouth. The giant eel birds of Regulus 5 must return to the caverns, where they hatch once every 11 years. Spock bashes his poor computer. Altair 6 is no ordinary matter. Vulcan's atmosphere is thinner than Earth's. T'Pau is the only person to ever turn down a seat in the Federation Council. All right. So, Walter, you said you had a story about Arlene Martell, who was amazing, by the way. I know I'm like 60 years behind on this, but I'm like, whoa, does anybody realize how stunning she is?
Yeah. So before Star Trek, BST, before Star Trek, I was in a theater group called Theater East. And we did scenes in the group. We didn't showcase. We didn't, and that's ultimately why I left Theater East, because I wanted to be seen, and hopefully get some interest in hiring me professionally. And I did a scene with Arlene, whose real name was Arlene Sachs, a nice Jewish girl who became Arlene Martell. So we did the scene. She was really exotic looking, in a very pleasing way. And I don't remember what the scene was. I do remember that at the end of the scene, we kiss. And I was kind of on the shy side. I was one of those guys, and she gave me a little tongue.
Did that get you out of your shyness, or did you recoil?
I was very surprised at that. So,
you're like, are we still acting?
Yeah. The director yelled cut 15 seconds ago.
Yeah, that was amazing. I did not expect that. So that was neat. And we did a good scene. Whatever the scene was that we performed, we did it well. And then years later, years after Star Trek and had come and gone in terms of a viable entity, I was directing at a college. I was directing some films. I was directing some films, and the two guys who were running the class brought Arlene in to do a scene that I directed. I directed her in the scene, so that was kind of fun. It was long after the fact, but she was very charming and pleasant, and we got along well.
Yeah.
I never brought up the tongue thing.
Yeah, if you had brought that up to Spock, he might have picked you to come down to the planet Vulcan. Let's bring Chekov. I gotta fight this guy to the death.
I did want to mention one other thing regarding the female performers on our show. They did soft focus on all the females.
Really?
On Arlene and on Majel and whoever else was
T'Pau.
It's Grace. I don't know if Grace Lee was on that or not, but they did soft focus, which was interesting because I only was aware of that in films, in motion pictures. I wasn't aware of it being done on television.
Can you tell the audience what the soft focus is?
Yeah, it's to make them look younger and more attractive. You don't see any lines. You don't see any, anything. The makeup is very smooth. That's something that has always been done on film, particularly way back as the 40s and the 50s. So it was curious to me to see that happen on our television series. The other thing that I was not aware of, and it probably was done on other episodes, but I was not familiar with it, was when they were in the lift, they were not going vertically. They were going horizontally because the luminous bulbs they had were flashing horizontally. So we weren't going up and down. We were going to the side.
Sounds fun.
Wow. Yeah. That is cool. I actually wanted to bring up Majel a little bit because I thought she gave a great performance in this episode. I don't know if anybody else did, but I loved when she was kind of tearing up in that scene with Spock, when she just looked amazing to me. And I thought I wrote down her, one of her best performances that I've seen her.
And it's a very different type of performance than Cirroc and I are used to seeing. We're used to seeing her being in charge and larger than life and, owning the place more so than, I don't want to say somebody with more depth, but certainly, different layers. And Cirroc, I actually thought of you at that point because you, like me, probably thought, oh, when we are watching Strange New Worlds, the new Star Trek series, Strange New Worlds, that's doing very well, we're seeing hints of Nurse Chapel and Spock and their romance, kind of a forbidden romance, kind of an unsure, she likes him, he kind of likes her, but she seems to be pushing for it a bit more. We're seeing this way back in 1967. They were planting those seeds, no pun intended, at that point. But
no pun intended. I love that.
I say that out loud. Sorry.
Well, see, that was part of, I think, the inducement for her to get involved. That this was supposed to be a running situation where she's got a thing for Spock. As we proceeded over the course of 2 seasons, that kind of lost, and Majel got pretty much upset about the way things evolved for her character. She thought there would be a relationship with Spock, and she could pine for him, and there could be moments when they showed an interest in each other. Now,
because
Gene
those are great moments. These are the kind of things that really sunk in an audience.
Yeah, so you wonder, Gene didn't twist any elbows. He didn't say, guys, as far as I know, he didn't say, the guys, let's involve Spock and Nurse Chapel more, which would have been, I think, very interesting. If, you could have some very comedic moments where Nurse Chapel is really feeling very tender and very attracted to Spock, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. It's not his purview, what's happening. And that would have been really fun. It would have been really kind of fun to see.
Yeah.
But anyway, so by the end of our show, she was upset with us. Now, you guys brought me on the show to reveal stuff that nobody knew about. So,
this is
so
great.
I'm doing that. So when she started working on Next Generation, she felt much more comfortable. She felt much more involved, much more a part of the show. And as a consequence, she felt a little more aggressive about being upset with the way she was dealt with on the original series, in which she would say things that were kind of I don't know, bitter is the right word, but she wasn't happy with our show, and she loved being on Next Gen.
Well, your husband's the boss, so I don't know. It's not really much we can do about it.
Yeah.
So that must have been a long car ride home, as they say. But
well, I don't think they were married at that time. Were they married yet at that point?
Oh,
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I thought she did great. And what alluding back to what Ryan was talking about, and even what you said, Walter, about her being on the Next Generation, she gives a completely different performance in the Next Generation. The Luoxana Troy character is way more of an extrovert, way more of a scene hogger, give me the scene. I'm going to be the star of the scene, and in this particular, she was, more of a complimentary character. There was a nice shot that I thought the director did of her sitting and listening to Kirk and McCoy talking about Spock's condition. And as she was listening off in the back, she got up and went to tell Spock, we're going to go back to Vulcan. That close up on her, just that solo shot, I thought she was just great in this episode, completely different than what I've seen her before, and a more internal performance. And I preferred it. I thought, to me, this was one of the best performances she gave. Another thing I wanted to say about this episode was literally very little, if none at all, special effects.
Right.
This episode is carried with the storyline, with good performances, good acting. You have that set on Vulcan and stuff, but there's no real special effects involved with that. That's just the set. I thought they made such a great sci-fi show with no special effects, just based on the story alone, just based on the acting. And, I felt a closeness, a kinship to the Twilight Zone. There was, I always talk about how much I love the Twilight Zone. This episode felt the same kind of pace and great performances that I would get in the Twilight Zone. The other show that I would love as well is Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which you mentioned not too long ago, Walter. So it falls in the area, in the same hemisphere for me as the Alfred Hitchcock and the Twilight Zone, as far as mystery, as far as my curiosity to find out what was going to happen. I thought the storytelling was on par for that.
The only thing that bothered me, speaking of special effects, and I can understand why they chose to do what they did, was when Kirk gets his blouse cut, and you see his skin, and there ain't no blood. I would have liked to have seen a little blood. On the other hand, it could be distracting. You could be focused on that.
I thought the same. I think it was a continuity thing, where it's just they had to kind of hide that a bit at first, because then otherwise they constantly have to be retouching and it's soaking into the shirt and all this kind of stuff. That's just my assumption, is it was a continuity thing. But then at the end, suddenly there's tons of blood. There's nipples everywhere. There's blood everywhere.
There was? Whose nipples? I didn't see any nipples.
Oh, you missed out. There's definitely some Kirk blood and nip. Well,
yeah, I also like the language too. There were words that I think Spock called Kirk and everybody an outworlder.
Yeah,
there's a thing no outworlder may know. Like, there were certain things that makes it sound authentic. And another thing I liked about this is why we watch Star Trek. We want to learn about other cultures, right? Other alien cultures, what their traditions are. And this gave us a lot of that too. Here we are, we're in a Vulcan wedding ceremony, which I thought the set to me looked a lot like Stonehenge, the way the pillars were set up. Did anybody else get that feeling?
Yeah, I could see that. Definitely. Yeah, I thought the set was quite interesting. It was different enough, to feel like we were in foreign territory. It was alien territory. At the same time, it wasn't inordinately elaborate. There was a kind of feeling of space, and it just added, I don't know, it just added to the sense of a different place and a religious place as well. You had that feeling. And the lady, what was her name?
T'Pau.
What's her name?
The mom or the wife?
The mom.
That's T'Pau.
And what's her name?
Celia or Celia Lovsky.
Right. Yeah, she had a long career. She was working back, I think, in the 30s and the 40s. Yeah, and I'm sure Leonard knew her personally. Was my sense. Maybe not. Anyway, I thought she was quite good. I thought she did a very nice job. It's totally believable.
Mm-hmm. I liked her accent.
She had authority. I felt her, her power in that situation, her authority in that realm. Also, one thing that, going back to Mr. Theodore Sturgeon.
Yes.
I want to keep my foot on the gas when it comes to complimenting how well this script was, I think, because there were elements of the story that shows to me it puts Kirk on a high pedestal, in my opinion, when you make him make the statements that he did about willing to sacrifice his career to help his friend who had saved his life so many times. When he says that, and says, I owe the man he saved my life a dozen times. Isn't that worth the career?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's my friend. He says, he follows that up with, he's my friend. That is a way to paint your captain as a great leader who is selfless, going to go above and beyond to save somebody that he loves, his best friend, even if it means facing court-martial or whatever those consequences would have been for him. So I just think it's from a storytelling perspective, we talked about how Picard in the beginning was against children. He hated children. Now, get the kid off my bridge. And the boy, what's the boy doing here? And it paints your captain in a certain light when you write it that way. Make him seem irritable, not loving or compassionate, or there's certain things that you take away from those characteristics. But when you talk about Kirk and you talk about him in this way, I thought it elevated him. It made him seem, in the beginning he was a little hesitant to even listen to McCoy. McCoy stops him in the hallway like, hey, I want to talk to you about Spock. He hasn't been eating. And he's like, yeah, whatever. I got to go. I got things to do. But then he starts to settle into compassion to the concern, and then even willing to sacrifice his life at some point because it got to that level. So I just think it paints your captain in a beautiful brushstroke if you're going to be writing for a lead.
I think you're right on the nose. And it's not something you saw a lot of in television, man and man expressing their love for each other when it isn't a homosexual thing where it's just that feeling of great friendship. I think that was one of the most appealing things about Star Trek. We saw that vulnerability and the care that they had for each other. And as we talked about with Theodore Sturgeon, you have that feeling. At the same time, you have a fight to the death. Now, that's terrific. That's great writing. There's all that conflict there. They love each other. They're having a fight to the death, and that's inspirational writing. I think it was, and I think it's so much appeals to the television audience to see that.
It's almost Shakespearean to have two great friends being forced to fight to the death. Feels like a Shakespeare thing. I do want to point out something by Mr. Sturgeon. I've got a fun personal story with him as well, a little indirectly. I played a role. Now, everybody might know our friend Mr. Mark Zickrey, who has written certain episodes of Star Trek and a bunch of other sci-fi things. He's got a sci-fi series called Space Command. I acted in it. My role was Lieutenant Sturgeon, and he said the role was named after Theodore Sturgeon, one of his favorite sci-fi writers.
Jeez, I thought it was named after a fish.
That was the other part, but I was like, no, I want the sci-fi guy. I like that story better. He's like, are you sure we can make it?
I kept looking for the fins. I didn't see any fins.
I feel like sturgeon are pretty big. But anyway, that's what I thought at first until he told me that that's what it was. And this might be the first thing I've seen from Theodore Sturgeon, actually.
Yeah. I met him. He was a friend of Harlan Ellison, and I met him. He was a charming guy.
Some of the lines that he said in this episode, that he wrote in this episode, that stand out to me. One of them was the Vulcan line that T'Pring was saying back to Spock and vice versa about parted, never and always touching and touched. I thought it was well written. I like the way they played with the language there. It was a little bit of being parted, having parted, but never parting. There was a playfulness, kind of a poetry to the language that I enjoyed in this episode. And the other thing that I thought was one of my takeaway lines that I really thought was very well written, and that was, having is not as pleasing a thing as wanting.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that is such a great, because when you have something, you have it, and you don't cherish it with the same level of, vitriol as you would when you want something and you're willing to make sacrifices and go the extra mile. But once you've got it, there's a little bit of, okay, what else is there? What's onto the next thing to go and
human nature after? Yep, totally.
Yes. One of the things that just occurred to me hearing you talk, Cirroc, one of the things that made Star Trek so successful is they hired science fiction writers. They didn't hire people who extrapolated from other stories and other plot lines. They hired people who thought in terms of science fiction. That was the motivating source of their stories, and so each time it was like a new adventure, because you had people who had that kind of mindset. They wanted to tell stories that had a frame of reference that was different than what you saw on TV, a lot on TV. That they had a novel way of looking at things. Sturgeon was terrific at that. He was He was the I don't know. I can't think of the word. Anyway, he was the kind of writer that was best suited to write for Star Trek because he thought in those terms.
I just wanted to add as well that when I was watching this towards the end, I remember thinking, wow, imagine if 1967, this I believe was probably before the internet and Twitter, if I remember correctly. And these people that are watching this, September 15th, 1967, this is the first episode of season 2 as far as when it aired. I wonder what was going through their mind when Captain Kirk dies, if they're actually thinking, whoa, is this show actually going in a different direction? This is the first episode. Maybe this is just going to be Spock's ship, you know? And I just thought, I bet they fooled a few people, and I thought that was really cool. But we got to go in just a second or two. Before we go, let's talk about the home run of the day, shall we? Look at this. Cirroc, who do you say gets the home run of the episode?
Yeah, this is very tough because I thought it was so brilliantly acted. I thought the acting was so good in this episode that it there's moments when it's slow, but it's slow and you're still captivated. It's still riveting. And, even though there's not a chase scene or a blow up ship or, things that keep audiences kind of out of their seats, I was still watching this with my eyes focused on what's going to happen because the performances were that good. So as much as I want to give my home run to the actors, in particular, Mr. William Shatner and the late great Leonard Nimoy, I still have to go with the writer because it just gave you so much. So the Theodore Sturgeon is going to get my home run for this episode.
What about you, Walter? Who gets the home run of the episode for you?
Cirroc gives a very convincing explanation as to who he thought hit the home run. The fact of the matter is, I was going to say Leonard, but after hearing him and after going over in my mind what we've discussed, I think Ted Sturgeon definitely should receive that accolade. I think he did a terrific job. He was a very creative, bright writer. He understood the kind of stories that we were going to tell, and so I'm in accord.
All right. I'm going to go along with that as well. I agree. Theodore Sturgeon, great. There were so many great things in this. I do want to give a honorable mention, of course, to the first appearance of Chekov. This was Chekov's first appearance.
Yes.
So this was a new character being introduced for the first time in this episode, and you nailed it, by the way. I'm sure people loved you on day one. And I also want to give a secondary shout out to the person that was doing the scoring, because the music was unbelievable. The scoring was fantastic. Really loved it. I was like, wow, they made good music back then. That's amazing. That's it. Let's say thank you to a few other amazing people, and their names are as follows. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Seagull, Eve England out in Wales, who, by the way, is going to Stonehenge this week, she mentioned, speaking of Stonehenge.
Oh, wow.
Yvette Blackman, Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin.
Arukin.
Titus Muller, Darlena Marie, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Life from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum, and of course, Jason Oken. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all next. We'll be right back on the seventh rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule. This is the free-for-all. Melissa Longo's here.
Hi.
So is Jason Oken with the cool background. Mai is live in Tokyo, also a pretty cool background. We're going to hear some stories, I bet. Dr. Mohammed Noor knows just about everything, and he's going to impart some biological information on us, probably. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri. We've got Greg Kenzo, cool background too. Carrie Schwent is here. She's got a couple images of Spock and T'Pring. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here. We've got Guldu Scott Jensen, and of course, Marsha Classic Schreier. Allison Leach Hyde is also here. Very quickly, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm going to say this was like an 8-2. I'm going.
Does anybody else?
And that might be low.
Anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
8-3, just so I can go a little bit above Cirroc.
You can do 3. I'll do 4 then. 8-4. See who's taking the boat home today.
We're bidding up. I'll go for 8-5.
Yeah.
8-7.
Oh, 8-7. All right. Nobody got it right, but you were all tickling it. 8.6 is the answer. Ooh. Very good, everybody. Very close. Mm-hmm. Also, did anybody catch the NAM today? Walter, we do something called non-appearance mentions. When somebody's mentioned in the episode, but they probably didn't get a paycheck that day, or maybe if they're a series regular, because they didn't show, they weren't seen at all in the entire episode. Did anybody catch it?
The NAM?
T'Pau.
And I could be wrong on this.
Oh, is she? T'Pau.
But did we see Scotty?
No, we didn't.
But Spock said Scotty will be in charge from here. So non-appearance mention for Scotty.
Good catch.
All right.
Yeah.
Melissa Longo, can you please get us started off on the right track?
Can I just say how much I enjoyed this episode? I enjoyed it so much. The performances were nuanced and really well done. There was a sense of character and relationship that was great to watch. The stakes were high, and I don't know. And I love the styling of the episode, particularly of T'Pau and T'Pring. They're just, both of them were stunning, in my opinion. But I really enjoyed this episode. But it did raise a question in my head for Walter about the memories that you had with this episode, if you could share. If while you were watching it, did anything spring to mind from recording this episode?
You guys didn't see what preceded this? No,
we haven't.
Oh, God! I went on forever. Cirroc fell asleep twice.
I faked it once just to get you to stop.
Well, I was brilliant. I sat at that console, and my God, I was so good. No, I wasn't. I was barely there. It was a one-day show for me. We talked about Leonard Nimoy and Bill Shatner in particular, how profound their performances were, and that as far as I was concerned, the last time I watched Star Trek was when I saw the Cage. And I had commented that at that juncture that I was looking at a guy with funny eyebrows, and he had, over the course of a year, or 2 years, he had developed such an in-depth, dimensional being that was totally relatable to. And you didn't think about eyebrows; you thought about what this alien presence was going through, and with such subtlety and the word you used, nuance, it was very, very impressive. So I didn't remember him. I guess I saw the episode once before this, but I didn't remember how good he was. And Bill was very, very instinctive and very intuitive. He had some very spontaneous moments that I felt were very genuine. So, yeah, I was very impressed. The thing that impressed me most, and Ryan and I both felt that way, and I think Cirroc as well, was how well written the episode was. Theodore Sturgeon, who was a real science fiction writer. I mean, this was his venue. This is his ballpark, and he wrote an episode that was totally involving and sustaining and surprising and inventive. And so I was very impressed with Theodore Sturgeon as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely sang his praises. Thanks very much, Melissa Longo. Cool shirt, by the way. All right, thanks. Jason M. Oken is here. What's up, Jason? What do you think of this episode?
Well, this was obviously an absolute classic, and there's no disputing that. I mean, yes, it was filmed 5th in the 2nd season, but I think people knew from the start that they were going to lead in with this one. You know, I think it started with NBC and sort of went on. Everybody is at the top of their game, for sure. You know, starting from Walter, as you said, the script. I mean, certainly Theodore Sturgeon, but it was rewritten heavily by Dorothy. Heavily. A lot of it was changed. I mean, the basic story is there, but a lot of the dialogue was changed. It became sort of more personal, more Star Trek.
And I want to jump in. That may well be the case, and I don't know that for a fact. Were you working on the show? No, you were a baby.
It's you just read things, you look at different versions of things, and you can tell who did what.
Did you get it from These Are the Voyages, Mark Cushman?
Some of it, yes. Some of it, I just literally got the documents and read them.
Okay, I just want to add, as a in-person observer, is that Gene did that with every script. No matter who wrote it, Gene rewrote it. And so it's not a reflection on the writer, because the writer did a terrific job. There were times when it was a little arbitrary what Gene did. He was compelled to contribute to each episode. So, but bear in mind that regardless of how heavily he rewrote it, the story was invented by Ted Sturgeon, and he was a very creative and adept professional screenwriter, and he should be commended for that.
Yeah, one thing, Walter, I wanted to ask you, and this kind of goes back to the script itself. There's quite a bit of direction in the script, both for the director and, you know, talking about what the expressions even on the faces of the characters should be. As an actor, do you find that helpful when you get a script like this with a lot of direction like that, or would you like to have more freedom to sort of interpret and do what you think is right for the character?
It's an interesting question. It happens to be not appropriate because the regulars were never given directions by the directors who came on, did a show, and walked away. The sense was, we've been doing the roles for quite a while. They were not going to interfere with what we were doing. They focused on the guest actors whenever there was a guest actor who had not played the role before. But they almost never gave us directions. I remember that in the 2nd season, we had 2 directors. We had Joe Pevney and Mark Daniels. I had worked for Joe Pevney on a Hitchcock, and he was very supportive. Mark Daniels never, for the first 5 or 6 episodes, never spoke to me. And my sense was, because I was new at all of this, my sense was that he just despaired of giving me any direction, because he never said anything to me. And I felt that he just didn't like what I had done. That's the way I interpreted it. because I had not been a regular on a show before. When we did I Mud, I actually saw him laugh. And I said, okay, I'm a part of this cast. I'm a part of this company. I have been accepted by Mark Daniels. So that's the way things were. Please bear that in mind. Television directors did not direct the regulars.
Mm-hmm.
They directed the guest actors.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Jason M. Oken. Mai is live in Tokyo. What's up, Mai? What do you think of this episode?
It's a great episode. I love it a lot. But I think everybody's offering a lot of great comments. I have a question for Walter, actually, about something that I've always been curious about working on the set of Star Trek. For so many of us, it's a bit of a compass for what's right, particularly when it comes to inclusion and acceptance. From the outset, even in the late 60s, the concept of IDIC was applied to treating people with respect, and in so doing, making the world a better place. At that time, the concept was applied to racial issues, maybe, later applied to issues of sexuality, most recently gender identity. Star Trek's been sort of a moral barometer that keeps up with the times, I think. Many, perhaps most fans, feel that this is one of the things about Star which differentiates it from every other media offering. And we as fans are proud to be supporters of this ideal, very proud indeed, I think. My question is, on the other staff that were there in the late 60s, as Star Trek was really ramping up, was there a feeling of pride or mission in ensuring that this ideal of inclusion and acceptance lived and was taken to heart by the public at large, or job for the actors, and it was only later that the concept of IDIC became to really mean something as an association with the Star Trek brand? Just curious about this, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. We were all much younger. We were struggling. We were very pleased that we were being called back each week. We were, became regulars. My initial response to this, as a 31-year-old, I was 31. I wasn't younger than that. Was I'm getting a paycheck every week. I'm being seen on television. I'm getting mail. None of that is very profound. None of that is very philosophical. None of that should provoke enormous pride in what I'm doing. And it didn't. I was thinking in terms of it as an actor. This was an opportunity. And with time, more and more people got in touch with me, reinforced my sense of doing something worthwhile. So it came from the fans initially, the embrace that we received. And as we went to conventions, as we were received with such exuberance and enthusiasm, and if I may dare say, love, it made us feel that much more important to what was transpiring. We felt we were contributing, and particularly if we were of that bent, if we were, and I think with the exception of maybe one or two actors on the show, I think we were all very progressive. We were all very liberal. And when it came to, discussing civil rights and humanity and race relations and all of those things, we were very supportive. It was nice to be part of something that you could believe in, that, even when it was going to be all over, we might be remembered for having contributed to something that is, very human and very much a part of a very proud message that we were putting forth. Anyway, so yeah, that was there initially, and I say this because I ain't no deity, I'm not. I know that I'm just another actor who was grateful for the opportunity to work. It was with time that I came to feel much more emotional about the show and much more pride and had much more pride in what we were doing.
Thank you. Awesome.
Great. Thanks very much. My live in Tokyo, Dr. Mohammed Noor, way out at Duke University. What's up, Mohammed? What'd you think of this one?
Hello, I love this episode, and I love that it's got like a cool biological angle to it too. So it got me thinking about a couple of things. Number one is this idea of sort of cyclical mating times, like having to mate every 7 years. And obviously, like there's a lot of species out there that do that right now, and even over across multiple years too. So one you guys probably are familiar with is cicadas. Right, these cicadas emerge every 13 years or 17 years, and that's when they mate. They're not mating up until that point in time. So that's kind of interesting. I thought it was amusing that he doesn't exactly need to mate just to go. He just needs to go through some sort of motions, because Spock didn't mate in this episode, and then he was okay at the end. So that was kind of interesting. But I looked up and I was curious about this, and this is my last comment I was going to say, is that I was wondering if there was any animal out there that actually dies if it's unable to mate. And I looked this up, and apparently female ferrets, fairly commonly, if they go into heat and they don't mate, will actually die.
Which kind of animal?
Ferrets. Like the pet ferrets, the kind of like weasels.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, at least that's what I found on the web. I didn't know that ahead of time, but I Googled that. Wow. Like, oh, fascinating. So, to quote Spock.
Good stuff. Dr. Mohammed Noor is an evolutionary biologist, by the way, everybody. So he knows of what he speaks.
Spock the ferret. Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Not furry enough. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri. What do you think of this episode, TJ?
Oh, this is one of my favorites. Brings back a lot of memories, especially the music. I love all the music from the original classic episodes. And this one has one of my favorite musical sequences in it, so much so that when it came back a couple of years ago on Strange New Worlds, I literally yelled as soon as I heard it. And so, I was grateful to be able to revisit this episode. One of my favorite lines was uttered by T'Pau. She said, "The air is the air." What can be done? When Doc McCoy say the atmosphere is too thin, she's like, "Hey, it's the air. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do about it?" So fun episode, great episode, classic episode. I also appreciated the sense of camaraderie between the members of the crew, especially Walter in the scene between you and George. Where you're saying, "Hey, should I turn the ship around now?" Or I know he's going to tell me to turn the ship around. You just go ahead and do the deal. Okay, like I really appreciated that, because they gave me a sense of people that are working together every day. They're not going to just sit there like robots. So great episode, great banter, wonderful to revisit, and I'll have more later.
All right, great stuff. Looking forward to that more later as well. Greg Kenzo is out in Hawaii. What's up, Greg? What'd you think of this one?
I really like this episode. And that's kind of saying something, because I did start the original series from beginning a while back. I didn't get very far, but I didn't give it a fair chance. And so this season 2 really, there's so much of it that you can see throughout all the treks. Walter, one of your scenes that I really liked was the kind of just the slice of life with Sulu, or George Takei. We get to see that a lot more later on with like Michael Pillar's writing. He does a Julian and O'Brien on Deep Space Nine, and that's kind of just like, and it's almost a Lower Decks feel. You're not a Lower Decks character, as in a lower ranking officer, but we still get to see that kind of behind the scenes with you and Hikaru Sulu, which is groundbreaking in itself, that you're both on camera, Asian American and a man playing a Russian during is this the time of the Cold War?
Maybe. What's that?
Was this the time of the Cold War? I'm not super good on it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that being on TV, national TV, is groundbreaking, and so thank you for that.
Totally.
And thank you, George Takei, too. But yeah. Anyway, it was a great episode. It was, well done through and through. Thanks.
Well done through and through. Greg Kenzo, thank you very much for that. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear, what's up? What'd you think of this one?
I really, really liked it. I think prior to this week, I think I may have only seen it once on my first watching ever of it a few years ago when my husband and I started working our way through. I think after our first cruise, and so I hadn't seen it in years. And having seen Strange New Worlds in the meantime, I think I liked it even more because of Spock and T'Pau on Strange New Worlds. So I decided to put both of them behind me. Fantastic casting for the newer versions of them, I think. And the whole greeting and response that they do is it's beautiful. I find it beautiful. It's very, very poetic, not over the top or cheesy at all. Just the right amount of different, if that makes any sense at all. I've got a couple fun things I found in my research that I'll save for later. Walter, you're in George's two tiny little scenes. I found the two of you just so adorable. Just watching your tiny little banter between the two of you just made me smile. It was so. George Takei just has the best smile, I think. But both of you together were just adorable, and I love what's his name from the Monkees, that sort of hairdo.
Oh,
Like it very, 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 very much.
it's Max Factor. We went up there and we bought it from Max Factor.
Excellent. And in McCoy's office, I noticed on the wall behind him all of those different skulls from, I'm guessing, different races from different planets. I've got a thing for skulls. I paused it and I'm checking out all the different skulls, thinking they were just way too cool. And I will finish with a short little haiku that I created. So hope you like it. Spock is in a mood. Must honor the tradition. Course plotting whiplash. Yeah. Sulu had your back, telling you to be prepared for when Kirk said, "Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I changed my mind again. We're going back this way."
I was used to the limericks that went longer. I thought there was more coming. I remember you said haiku. Good stuff. Thanks very much.
I decided to do haikus.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Somebody who's high and cool. Chris McGee, what's up? What do you think of this one?
You know it. Yes. I won't reiterate what everyone else has already said. It's an iconic episode and all that. I'll touch on the little things. Like, for example, I don't know if it's maybe the HD upgrade of the episode, but I never really noticed before Nimoy's pretty excellent acting, like in his face and the way he carries his body, conveying his struggle, fighting the emotions building within him. Now, like, I never noticed before, I think, where he was holding that stylus behind his back and real tightly and shaking. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know if that was directed or not, but that was great. And I'm also starting to notice the musical score used in these shows nowadays. Of course, we all know the iconic fight theme music used later in the episode, but I'm kind of talking about more about the lesser known cues. For example, the guitar music was one of the first things I noticed that almost acts as sort of a theme for Spock whenever he's on screen. And speaking of the fight theme, I had definitely never noticed before the quiet, slow version of it that plays while Spock is explaining Pon farr to Kirk in his quarters. I'll save anything else for things left unsaid. Don't know if it was mentioned before, but there was some kind of in this episode. I think the jury may still be out on that. When Kirk says, if there's a problem of some sort, illness in the family.
Ooh, I like it.
So, not sure if that qualifies, but I'll throw it out there anyway. And finally, my memorable quote of the episode. I always remembered this one. After a time, you may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting.
Mm-hmm. It's the big one. Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Chris McGee, the Dark Lord. Marcia, Classic Schreier is here. Marcia, fun question for you. What did you think of this episode?
Oh, I didn't like it at all. It's one of my favorites. And it's a perfect episode to start season 2, even though it wasn't the first episode filmed. They picked the right episode to start season 2 because we see the development, the real development of the friendship between Kirk and Spock. Friendship and loyalty. I mean, he didn't care. Kirk didn't care if he was giving up his career to get Spock to Vulcan. So really appreciated that. And the scenes, as people have said, the scenes between Kirk and Spock in Spock's quarters, and the final scene with McCoy almost getting the last word. But of course, Kirk had to follow it up with a line. But in a pig's eye would have been a great line to end the episode with. So I really like it. One thing I didn't like was the whole discussion about T'Pring willing to being prepared to become the property of the victor.
Here, here. I agree with you.
For a forward-thinking or supposedly forward-thinking society that the Vulcans had, and with all their female, leaders. I mean, T'Pau is a big deal on Vulcan, and she's a woman. The last I looked, how could they have? I know it was the '60s, but how they could have a line like that bothered me.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't know if people know, but Celia Lovsky could not do the Vulcan salute. So they had her hand below camera, and she used her other hand to form the salute, and then she brought her hand up. And I'll save the rest for later.
Good stuff. Thanks very much, Marcia. Classic Schreier, Allison Leach Hyde is here. We got to watch her commute, you guys. It was great. What'd you think of this episode?
I enjoy this episode. This rewatch really struck me how funny it is. There's some great one-liners, and I love one-liners. It makes everything more fun to watch. And one of my favorite one-liners that made me laugh out loud was actually Walter's. And that was, I think I'm going to be space sick. Because that's great. I love that line.
Yeah. I like that one too.
Like Melissa, I loved all of the Vulcan costumes. I thought they were amazing. And I liked the little nod that all the helmets that all the guard type Vulcans were wearing were actually Romulan from the Romulan episode last season. And I like that they did that tie-in because it was revealed in the first season they're cousins. And so I like that they did that little tie-in. So like the episode, always well worth a watch. So fabulous.
Hell yeah. Thanks very much, Allison Leach Hyde. Gull do Scott Jensen. What is up, Scott? What did you think of this one?
That was once again, I could probably just echo a lot of things that everybody else is saying, but what struck me the hardest in this rewatch was definitely the feeling of camaraderie between everyone. And I wanted to also, bring up the great banter between everybody else. But my favorite part, once again, is going to go back to good old Dr. McCoy, because that tricky sleight of hand, just smart move that he plays at the end to trick probably the most brilliant race in the Federation, just with an old classic switcheroo. It's like a good Georgia man would, and just sneaks right out and saves the day, and then doesn't, pride himself on it in the end or anything like that. So he was very polite as well. So, absolutely loved it. I was also incredibly floored by Majel's reactions. What we have now with the retroactive storytelling of Strange New Worlds, it's giving us the stuff, but she, in her eyes and her facial movements when Spock is saying this stuff to her, well, I didn't need that backstory. I could just see in her entire countenance just this crushing feel of being that hard rejected by him, and what that must have felt like to her, and how much she must have felt for him. And it was absolutely moving, and she was incredibly brilliant. So I definitely would like to point that out. But yeah, I would say that an 8 whatever was too low. Let's give it a 10 for Sue.
Yep. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Scott. Jake's final take. Any final thoughts, Cirroc or Walter?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I liked when McCoy and Kirk were talking to the Admiral, and Admiral says, "Hey, you got to come to Altair. I don't care. You can't stop a Vulcan." And McCoy says, "Well, that's that." And I love Kirk saying, "No, it's not." Like, no, I'm going to make up the rules here. We do it. We play it how I want to play it, and I like that. And he was willing to risk, his whole career essentially to save his buddy. I thought that shows a good level of loyalty. Another thing I liked was the integrity that Spock had after having killed Kirk, saying, "Take me over to the base. I'm gonna turn myself in." It was kind of matter of fact. And I also like the way McCoy gave that line when he says, "Well, you're in command." Well, irony is you're in command now. You just killed the captain, so what do you want us to do? And he's like, "I want you to turn me in." I thought that was kind of a stand-up thing to do as well. I like the way Spock smiled at the very end when he found out that Kirk was still alive, and he broke his Vulcan character and kind of showed a lot of emotion, and then caught himself and kind of pulled it back. It was a moment that I enjoyed as well. And then also I would say, Walter, I felt like your hair was really big, and I thought that you need to bring a better comb. and that's my final take.
Yeah, that's very profound. And I thoroughly agree with you. My God. It would have been such a good performance had I not had such big hair.
I
love that.
Oh,
so anyway,
great, though. It reminded me of Columbo's big hair when he had his big hair moments. But I loved it.
Good of you to Spock that.
Okay.
So all I was going to say was what I said earlier before you folks came on, is that I thought it was, watching it again, I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the performances, particularly Leonard. Leonard was he so internalized that character. It wasn't a pretend kind of thing. I never felt. The one thing about Spock and the iterations of Spock over the consequence of over the time period that we have seen Star Trek, is that everybody else did an imitation. Leonard was Spock. That was always my sense, and particularly in this episode, when I watched Cage, I was more involved with his eyebrows than anything else. When I watched them on this episode, I felt like I was allowed into the inner machinations, the internalization of this character. It almost felt like it was like a peeping Tom. He was so good, so totally identified with the character that I was extraordinarily impressed. And Bill had some really delightful moments, very spontaneous moments, when I thought he did extremely well. But most of all, Theodore Sturgeon did a great job, regardless of how much, whatever the contribution was by Gene Roddenberry. Theodore Sturgeon was truly a brilliant television science fiction writer. And I think his name has to come first when it comes to discussing this story.
Mm-hmm. Not to be confused with Theodore East that Walter told us of earlier. But anyway, to quote Cirroc, that's going to bring us to an end here. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you to Melissa, Jason, Mohammed, sorry, TJ, Greg, Carrie, Chris, Marcia, Scott, and Allison. For myself, Walter, Cirroc, Melissa, and of course, Aaron Eisenberg, we'd like to thank you all for hanging out with us. We know you have a lot of podcasts to choose. I don't know, that felt like a commercial. We'll see you next time on The Seventh Rule.